Russia, didn't know any word in Russian. I was living in Lyon, in Montpellier, in Bordeaux, and it's just uncomfortable because people are not as civil as in Russia. There is also, of course, cliché about women, that they are very beautiful, but also very cold. I would say it's pretty true, to be honest.
There was a high demand on everything French in Russia. I mean, French literature, French language.
There are lots and lots of French words in Russian language. I explain it to the Russians and like, really? It's from France? And they try to read War and Peace and they see that the beginning is completely full with French. Why is it written in French? Napoleon ruined everything.
Suzdal Holding presents Dynamic Spectrum Talks now.
Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Dynamic Spectrum Talk podcast, a place, a space of dialogue where we, together with honorable guests from all over the world and different corners of the planet, see common ground between us, between countries, cultures, and nationalities. We do not draw boundaries, we build bridges. So our mission is opposite. Today, as usual, I'm Yuri Lindre, and it is more important that who is with me today. So last times we had a lot of talks with the representatives of the cultural sphere, art and music, but now we will speak with a beautiful lady from France who is a bioengineer, or at least was bioengineer, and a prominent blogger here in Russia. So let's welcome Gabrielle Duvoisin.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Comment ça va?
Très bien.
And let me start with the quote of one of the most famous French writers, Antoine de Saint-Exupery, who wrote in his most famous novel, probably, The Little Prince, the quote: "Here is my secret. It is very simple. Only the heart can see clearly. The most important things cannot be seen with eyes." Is it true? Do you support your writer?
Yeah, absolutely. And I absolutely love this book. So it's a pleasure to have it to start this podcast.
Yeah, Gabrielle, let's start with the obvious question. You were born in France and now you're in Russia. It's probably it was a long journey. And how in your life Russia appeared? What was your life before? And what do you do currently here in our country?
Yes, I live in Russia for already 3 years, and it happened a little bit randomly for me. I was studying abroad in Sweden, in Gothenburg, and the department for students, they organized a visa-free tour in St. Petersburg for a few days. So I decided to go just completely randomly. I was with a Japanese friend, and we decided, okay, let's visit Russia. I didn't know anything about Russia, didn't know any word in Russian. And I just came to St. Petersburg and I fell in love with the city and the people there just instantly. So it was completely random actually, because there was several choices. I could go to the north of Sweden or I could go to Russia, and I picked Russia. So random decision. And before that I had lived in several different countries, and I knew that I wanted to live abroad because it's just interesting. And it's finally in Russia that I understood that I want to stay here, because to me, Russia is a mix of something similar to France and something completely new that I didn't know that was interesting. There was a new alphabet. So to me, it was,
half new alphabet, let's be honest.
Well, if you have to relearn some letters, like for example, nowadays I'm reading a book where the D instead of D, they are written like G. And each time it's painful. I read slowly and so on because it mixes up everything.
Come on, your language is much more tricky. For example, auto brand, Peugeot.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like 4 letters.
Yes.
Peugeot, like 4. But in reality, it's P-U-G-U.
Yes, that's more beautiful.
I completely agree with you. But if you say that, okay, Russian D is like G, well, I can return you back the ball with the following example.
Pronunciation is not so easy in Russian too. Why do you say Malako for Moloko? It's written Moloko and you say Malako.
You can say Moloko and you will be understood. For example, in the southern Siberian regions, they still pronounce it like Moloko, but so they can tolerate it at least. So it's not a huge problem. Well, I agree with you that Russian language is difficult. So especially for those who came from the Roman language family, like French language. It has common roots with Italian, Spanish, Latin, of course, and Russian is quite far. So it's another branch of the European language tree. So quite complicated. But let me also confess and congratulate you that your knowledge of Russian is something not probably unique, but it's a huge achievement. I wish I could know and speak the French language like you do in Russian. So my congratulations, you did a great job. So it's indeed a hard work was done before.
Well, I'm not really proud of my Russian for now, but I'm working on it for sure.
Don't worry. Your Russian language is much better than my French.
But that doesn't mean anything.
It means a lot. Okay. The obvious question. So you were in St. Petersburg. So when you were studying in Sweden, in Swedish university, and you decided to come back to Russia again. How Skoltech Institute of Science and Technology appeared in your life?
After my studies, I started to look for a job in Russia. It took me 1 year to find a job because it's very difficult when you don't have experience. It's not very interesting for Russian companies to hire some kind of random French girl who doesn't have experience. So it took me a lot of time. I was actually living in Berlin. I was a nyanya, like a nanny in a Russian family there. And the father, who was Russian, he told me about Skoltech. So I applied. It was spontaneous application, I guess, to Skoltech, and I got an interview with them, and so I ended up after 1 year of search in Moscow in Skoltech.
All right, so and you became a bioengineer.
Yes.
Well, probably this is a complicated topic, maybe to discuss in details. So if you want, we can also speak about that. But most important, your transition from being a scientist towards becoming a blogger.
Well, it's a very recent thing because I quit my job like less than a month ago. So I didn't even look for a new job yet. I don't even know, because I want to take some time to really explore some topics that are interesting for me. For example, this video that I made a few weeks ago about Catherine II of Russia. That's really interesting for me to go deeper into a topic, to really take the time. I went to St. Petersburg to revisit the Hermitage Museum, to take videos of exactly what I wanted for my video. And this would be a dream to do full time. But at the same time, of course, it's not easy to live as a blogger compared to having like a regular normal job where you go every day and you get fixed salary. So I'm not sure if I will pull it out, but for now I want to give me the freedom of a few months to just explore topics that I want. For example, nowadays I'm really interested in the idea of cosmos exploration during Soviet Union. So just after this, I'm going to go to VDNH to visit the museum, and I want to make a video about that. And just because it helps me to learn more about Russia more in depth and to take the time really to explore a topic completely, which is why actually I really want to be a blogger. Not necessarily because I like speaking in front of people, but because it makes what I want to do as a hobby, like learning about Russia, into something more professional that I can do full time.
I see. You know what? Some people that are choosing to switch towards blogging, first of all, they are looking for the big stages. Mm-hmm. If you're not a professional artist or a singer, so it's another way to how to express yourself. The other, for example, as understood like you, is not to look for a huge audience, but to do something while you're still thinking what to do next.
Am I correct? That way.
In a certain perspective. Okay. I'm maybe not precise in the details because, of course, I don't know, but I'm just trying to figure out how blogging appeared in your life, because science is something that is very, very serious. You know, scientists, well, it's a typical stereotype. I know it's not the common story, but still, it's the people that are very deeply integrated in their activities. So they like a complete immersion in what they do. And if they due to some reasons, they stopped to doing what they usually do and used to do for years and turn to another area of activity, it looks a little bit not strange, but it's curious why.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but I was not like this. I was never completely passionate about science. I like it. I find it very interesting. But I choose to become an engineer because I knew that it would allow me to find a job pretty easily in any country, because you can work in English, then everybody needs engineers or scientists pretty much everywhere. So it was just for that reason, because it would give me freedom, first of all, to travel around. Second of all, because financial freedom also, I mean, it's pretty easy to find a job with this kind of
Education.
education.
You see, your Russian is perfect. So.
You speak Russian for 1 hour, my brain is dead. Yes. So yeah, it was also according to the advice of my dad, actually, whom I listened, and I really don't regret about it. I choose to go to engineering school in France. In France, it's very tough to do engineering school, and I hated it when I was there, honestly, because I'm more of an artistic person. Maybe I like learning languages, I like drawing, I like history. And so staying from 8 in the morning to 8 p.m., like learning about science and formulas and so on, it was not my thing. It's just a practical reason for which I choose science, not because of my heart.
I see. Well, we here in the studio, we cannot help you with drawing, but we can help you with the history. Let's talk about history, because probably not everyone knows well that Russian and Russian ties with France, historical ties, are very deep and very profound, starting from the Middle Ages, when the daughter of the Russian, I would say, Tsar, well, he was a great count at the time, it's called like this, became a queen of France when his daughter married to a king. Our history of our relations are like about 1,000 years old. And of course, maybe the peak, the top of these relations were at the end of the 18th century during the rule of Catherine the Great in Russia, when she was in direct personal contact with one of the most prominent philosopher of the time in Europe, Voltaire, and she was also very keen to take and rethink maybe and to try to implement the ideas of philosophers and lawyers and let's say most educated people from France, like Didier Diderot, to see how it can work in real life, not in theoretical. So, and this was a time when there was a high demand on everything French in Russia. I mean, French literature, French language, French education, French architecture. You already mentioned St. Petersburg, but Petergov, a small town, which was like a residence of the royal family of the Russian Empire, was also created under the influence of French culture, of Versailles, for example. So we understand that our history, our relations, and our integration, cultural integration, is very deep and profound, and not everyone knows about it.
Yes.
Let's speak about that. What you think and what was your discoveries?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that the correspondence between Catherine and Voltaire was particularly interesting, because both of them would find something interesting in this correspondence, in those letters. So as you said, Catherine was trying to apply all the ideas of in French it's called Lumière, I don't know how it is in, like, the Enlightenment, I think it's in English, practically in Russia. And for Voltaire, it was also interesting because he was like seeing how his ideas are applying in real life, which was not possible in France. So I think both of them found something very interesting in this correspondence. But yeah, our ties, like I see it especially every day when I'm learning Russian, because there are lots and lots of French words in Russian language. And it's funny because sometimes I tell them, I explain it to the Russians, and like, really, it's from France? Like, for example, this word chaise longue that we have, it means like a long chair, and usually Russians don't think that it's actually two words which make sense, and it comes from French. So I think it's interesting. I'm trying to...
Chaise longue, jalousie.
Yes.
Journal.
Marche-route, parachute, paysage, no, so many of them actually. And sometimes it's funny because it's French words, but they're a little bit twisted, like they don't sound French anymore, but you can see that the root is French. Even some, like, I don't know, planchette that you use for this tablet thing. Planchette for us is like a little thing where you cut vegetables. So the shape is the same, but the use of the word kind of changed over time. So it's interesting to dig into that and to see that there are French roots to many Russian words that we don't use sometimes in France for the same thing. So I'm trying to convince all the Russians to learn French because of that. You will learn about your own language if you learn French.
I had such opportunity to study French at school, but unfortunately there were problems with the teacher. Then I switched to English, and later I resumed studying at university for a while, and then I had to study another language. And how it usually happens when you have a language which is not well developed, so the newcomer, new language is suppressing the language you had in passive, and which is not very strong within you. So same stories happened with me. So I still remember something, I can pick up something, but in general I lost my skills in communication, and it's a pity. But language is beautiful, I agree with you. Language is very nice. This is why it was like 300 years ago, it was very poetic language, the language of poetry and literature, especially literature which were designed especially for women. Love stories, all these feelings.
Russians complain a lot about it also. For example, when they try to read War and Peace and they see that the beginning is completely full with French, then they will complain personally to me, like, why is it written in French? But I don't know, I think it's really great. It makes you obliged to learn a little bit of French as a Russian kid.
It was a language of nobility, but unfortunately we had to fight with Napoleon. It was very difficult and destructive war. So after it, there was a decline of French language and French culture in Russia. But as we already agreed that during the Catherine II and until the wars with Napoleon, the French language culture was, they were very popular, and it was the language of noble society.
Yes.
So it was a expression of good education if you can communicate in French.
But Napoleon ruined everything.
Yeah. You see a leader who created a civil code. Before Europe, Russia, any other countries, they didn't know what is civil law. So he created civil law, but also ruined probably a good union between our nations. So what is more not a heavy, but what is more important, development of the society in general through the law, new ideas, or dividing nations.
Yes, he made the wrong choice, maybe,
who knows. Gabriel, let's speak about how French people and Europeans in general, how they see Russian lifestyle. We all understand that in current geopolitical situation, of course, there are some difficulties, let's call it like this, in a soft manner. It's not sometimes uneasy to tell and to present to your audience, French audience, what's Russia in reality, so what's happening there. And of course, propaganda creates its noise, let's say informational noise in the international environment, but still, what do ordinary Europeans and French people think about Russia in general?
I noticed that there is a difference in generations in France. So many people who are older, like my grandparents, they have quite positive opinion about the Russians, actually. They will imagine like ballerinas or people playing the violin and educated people and very refined. But then there is also the opposite cliche where in France we also have this idea of Russian men who are really tough, who are like gangster and mafia and all that. And there is also, of course, cliche about women, that they are very beautiful, but also very cold, very demanding, which I can't say it's only a cliche. I would say it's pretty true, to be honest. About the country itself, of course, everybody thinks that it's a country where there is permanent snow or something. So, of course, when I show the south of Russia, people have trouble believing that it's actually Russia. And I have trouble believing that I'm actually in Russia when I'm, I don't know, in the Caucasus or in Sochi. It doesn't look like the picture that we have of Russia in Europe.
You know what, we have same in Russia, but opposite. We think about France probably better than it is in reality.
Yes, absolutely.
Especially rural areas of France and southern areas, we still think and imagine that there is a valleys, hills with wineries, and the south itself, the coastline is beautiful. But we all understand that there are cities like Marseille, which are probably not very friendly, especially to those who belong not to dark origins, etc. And we think about France using the knowledge and impressions that we got in the past. For example, your famous artist like Alain Delon, he also shot in a few Soviet movies in his past, in his life. So it means that we had a high cooperation even during the Cold War, etc., culturally. And we still have these positive memories because we know very little about modern France. We don't know, well, people in general know that there are high migration flows, that there is Emmanuel Macron and he has a wife who is twice older than him. And but this is it. Actually, this is not the knowledge about the country and about the society.
Yes.
But our knowledge is very positive due to, let's say, old times.
Yes. Well, there was some truth about that, of course. If you go around villages in France, it's incredibly beautiful. My grandparents live in Normandy, for example, which is a very picturesque region. So if you go around old villages, these old stones, it's just beautiful. But the thing is that, first of all, things are changing. So you see the changes, especially in large cities, which are degrading really fast. Even in my lifetime, I could see it after 10 years, that it's not the same France. I mean, nowadays it's pretty uncomfortable to live in many large cities. I was living in Lyon, in Montpellier, in Bordeaux, and it's just uncomfortable because people are not as civil as in Russia, for example. You see a huge contrast in that. People are much more aggressive. You have a lot of crime. You have people who live in the streets. It's dirty, all that. So it's very contrasted, I would say. I would say that we have a reverse opposite situation between Russia and France. In France, it's more comfortable than in Russia to live in small cities, in small villages, because the infrastructure in French, I cannot say that in English, infrastructure is better in France than...
How will you call it? Infrastructure in French? Infrastruction?
Infrastructure is the same word, just the accent, yeah. So yeah, the infrastructure is better in villages in France than in Russia. But if you compare the large cities, then it's way better to be in Russia than to be in France. Just because here people are just more polite and they don't behave like savages like we have in France. In France, I don't know why people took the habit of degrading everything around them. So if you are somewhere, you will use the place. And even if you leave it completely dirty or you destroy it, it's okay. It's how people do it. Whereas here, people are more respectful of each other. And I know that Russians themselves, they have trouble believing in that because many Russians, they still, in their mind, they still live in the 90s. They still feel like their own country is dangerous. Or, for example, I told my colleagues that I'm using the night train very often.
You never seen what is dangerous in reality. What is danger in reality? Yeah, they still think that this is the real danger, but the real danger is opposite.
Yes. Or even comfort, about comfort. Like, as I said, I was telling my colleague that I was using the night train very often, and he told me, but you're crazy, this is so dangerous, why are you using the night train, this is crazy. And then I just want to tell those Russians, go to France for 2 months, then come back to Russia, and you will just enjoy life, I promise you. Just go to Marseille a little bit, and you will see the difference. Even women tell me, like, it's so dangerous in the center of Moscow, we have so many migrants and so on, and I'm like, we don't live in the same Moscow, I think, because I don't see it the same way.
I can explain, because we also have changes, because we live in reality on a planet which is under heavy influence of globalization. Of course, the world became smaller. It's very easy to travel, to communicate, etc. And if we compare Russia and big cities, let's say like 15 years ago and now, of course, we see some changes. And some changes are not that positive. Of course, now it's the technology enters our life. It's everything is easier. Shops working 24 hours. You can deliver anything you want. So actually, for lazy people, it's close to paradise. But the lifestyle also had changed, because like 15 years ago it was indeed safer and more friendlier, because there were not so much noise, because people are coming in the city, so it's like intensive. I mean, the energy generating with a huge amount of people are sometimes not very positive, because too many. It's like a huge hives of people, especially like Moscow, for example. But everything can be realized through the comparison. If you compare current status, let's say in the big cities of Russia and the big cities of France. Unfortunately, I've been to France only once, so I will not express my impressions. But I lived in Belgium, for example, for 3 months and worked there. And I can say, yes, of course, Russia is much more safer and the cities are much more safer. But I'm sure, and the people I met who lived and worked in Belgium, let's say 30 years ago, they say Belgium was like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like Russia now, for example. It was almost safe. In policemen, they didn't wear the guns with them. Like 25 years ago, they didn't have guns, because it was not necessary.
Yeah.
Now in Brussels and the big cities in Belgium, they are equipped like soldiers, all ammunitions, rifles, etc. So they're like at war.
Yeah.
But there is no war. It means that the life has changed, and it has changed completely through the life frames of only one generation.
Yes, and this is crazy to me because people don't seem to realize it. Even when I speak to my parents about it, my parents who are educated, smart people, they don't want to see that. They don't want to hear about it. My mother, for example, she's a French teacher and she works a lot with migrant students. And even when half of her classroom is from Africa and they don't even speak proper French. I mean, it's the first generation sometimes, so of course they don't really know the culture. They don't know, and some of them are Muslim also, so they don't respect a white woman without a hijab. So it's a huge cultural difference. And when I try to tell them, like, I cannot live in that. It's not my culture. It's not my country. I don't want to. They tell me, no, but migration is so great for a country. It's a lot of diversity which is coming into the country. And those people, they are working. They are doing so many things for France. And then I look around and I see them like just sitting there in the street and we give them money. The government is paying for them. Even if you look on Instagram, there are some of them migrants of the first generation who are bragging about it, saying like, look, if I was working full-time as a minimal wage, I would receive less money than what I receive by not working, because the French government is just paying for everything, basically. They're giving them habitation, everything, like apartments, paying for medical bills, everything. So I'm thinking, okay, France just doesn't want to be safe. France wants this mess. People don't even want to understand that there is a problem. And when I traveled between, even when I was living in Poland, actually, I didn't know the language. It was not my country at all, because I don't know the culture or the language.
But it has less migration influence as France. So
yes, exactly. So when I came back to France, I realized, okay, I feel more at home in Poland, where I don't speak the language, than in my own country, where I've been living my whole life. And from that moment, I realized, okay, I cannot live in France anymore.
You know what? I also thinking a lot about the current status, why there are so a lot of migration incomes and this diversity, or how they call it diversity. I would agree with this concept in any form, with one very critical, I would say, fact, or if it was working in a both way. For example, people are coming into Europe and the diversity is happening, all right. Why Europeans do not go to Africa or somewhere else? They were not allowed to go there. There is no diversity. So it means that diversity, so-called diversity, is happening only within the territory of only one region. It's not happening everywhere else.
I'm not sure that any French people wants to go to Africa to live, though. I'm not sure there are many candidates. Even if we could, like, this is not even the question.
This is a correct suggestion, and but the answer is very simple, because the local governments, the local countries, they created the system that you don't want to go there. Mm-hmm. So they are protecting themselves.
I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't be such a bad thing if they could attract a little bit more Europeans, or... Well,
there are smart countries that are attracting European specialists. I know even in Africa, like country like Botswana, they're inviting specialist engineers. For example, a professional like you could get a high-paid job there, because they need specialists. Local specialists are low quality compared to what the European market can offer. So they're attracting. But it's not about the huge flows of people. They don't need it. They just need a specialist in concrete areas of their economy. So if they come, they treat you well, they respect you, and they will pay you twice if you not just to do your work, but also share your knowledge and teach locals.
Yes.
They will pay you twice. it's a normal migration. It's fine. But nobody tells that there should be diversity because you come, you go to Africa, to Botswana, and you respect local lifestyle because it's their countries.
Yes.
As their country, their life path. They lived like for 1,000 years, more than 1,000 years. So this is it. Nobody allow you to, let's say, install there your way of how you dress, how you behave.
Yes.
It isn't possible.
In France, we were completely guilty of that because, first of all, we welcomed the migrants because we needed them just to work for France. And then things started to go south because we started to tell them, okay, if you live here, it means that you can bring your whole family. So it means that the people who will not be useful for France. And then there were so many of them that it's just becoming completely impossible to control. So they come here. They are not welcomed by the locals because locals are afraid of migrants with everything that is happening. Plus, they get some benefits. I mean, why would they change? Why would they try to adapt to France when they get all the benefits and they don't need to change?
Exactly.
Yeah. But I felt like in Russia, it's much more reasonable than that, and people have more common sense. Usually Russians disagree. They tell me, no, we have a huge problem with migrants. But here they work. They are taxi drivers. They are construction workers. Here the police is strong enough so that when they see the police, they still fear the police. Whereas in France, nobody fears the police. They cannot do anything. The police, if they touch a black guy, they are going to go to prison themselves.
Well, there are two different opinions. One opinion say, there is a a visible difference, and it will remain as it is. The other point of view says, okay, the difference between current France and Russia is like 20 years. In 20 years, we'll see.
I think it's more than 20 years, honestly. And Russia seems to also fight against it because, for example, after what happened in the Caucasus, there was a lot of laws which are passed to try to regulate it. Whereas in France, we still go the same way. Like, still, we didn't close the borders, we didn't do anything, didn't react. Because even French people themselves, they don't want to hear about it. Whereas Russians, they're very worried about migration. In France, no, you cannot speak about that. Only a few people from the far-right activists, they speak about it. But usually people say, no, migration is just perfect. Like, send them in, send them in. Good luck.
Good luck. All right, let's leave this topic. I think we're done with it, but we didn't touch the very important moment, the commonalities, the common ground between Russian and French. What did you find common? You know the Russian language very well, and you lived here for several years. Mm-hmm. Probably you already have at least general impression what is Russian soul,
yes,
Russian mindset, and the Russian lifestyle. How does it differ compared to the French one?
Once again, there is a generational difference, and I recognize my grandparents in the Russians, which is probably why I feel so comfortable here, because the generation of my grandparents in France, they are more traditional, they have more common sense, they have a much more traditional way of life compared to new generations. So there is the old generation in France, which is to me pretty similar to Russians. Then the new generation is much more different. But still, we have many things in common. Like, to me, I don't feel like a foreigner when I'm, sitting in a family in Russia and having a very long conversation about, what topics. Or Russians are very open. I noticed that much more than the French. Very curious and open. Even when I take the train, usually people learn from my accent that I'm from France, and they start asking questions. They are very open with any topics. We can speak really openly, like with the old generation in France. Now, new generation is different because people are much more brainwashed and they don't want to talk about some specific burning topics, let's say. Whereas in Russia, you can still speak about it. So to me, the biggest connection between Russia and France is like old generation in France and Russia nowadays. To me, there is something really similar between the two.
Probably the cultural background had much common, at least in the past. Probably we had read more or less same books.
Yes.
I mean, at least our ancestors.
Yes. Russians know a lot about France, actually. When we start speaking about it, they will tell me a lot about French culture, about French authors. And in France, we know about Dostoevsky. Lots of people will read, not Pushkin, actually, because Pushkin, I think you can read him only in Russian. Like, translation don't make much sense because the interest of his writings is really the language itself, not necessarily the story, but really how he wrote it. So it doesn't make sense to translate it. But if you take Dostoevsky, is probably the most famous Russian author that we read in France, I would say. Lots of people read him.
You very rightly mentioned, I didn't think about it, but you're correct. the genius of Pushkin is not the core of his writing, but the way how he did it, how he managed to express himself in a sophisticated manner. So this is a real masterpiece of the self-expression.
Yes.
I would say so.
But it means you cannot really enjoy it as much in French as in Russian. You cannot translate it really.
I remember from my early school days, we had how we used to study French through music and some songs, or I don't know, what is it, like Sur la pente de Vignon, on y danse, or La petite lapin est très très gourmand, il va au jardin comme au restaurant.
This one.
I mean the song, but whatever. I don't know. I was like 7 or 8 years old, so I don't remember where exactly it was taken, of course. But you see, some memories I still remain. I cannot express myself in French anymore, but the memories from early days when I first time touched the language, introduced to the language, it's still there. So it means that somehow they affected, because I still remember these examples. If there were nothing useful in those lessons or in this information, these songs, to me, to my personal, I don't know how to call it, to my personality, I wouldn't remember it. So it means that a certain, maybe a minor part of French culture, for example, is still with me, as with other millions of Russians as well.
Yes.
They may not realize it physically, but indirectly we still feel it.
Actually, the only people that I met foreigners who speak perfect French are Russians. I have several Russian friends who speak really good French, even if they have never been to France. They have perfect accent, perfect pronunciation, and grammar. Whereas if you look at all the Americans that I know who live in France for 30 years, they're still completely messy with the way that they speak French. So I think even between languages there is something compatible. Either maybe Russians are very brilliant in the way that they learn the language, or we just have languages which are more compatible between themselves than English.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And the final question, I think, for today, let's talk about your blogging activities. We already touched it in our discussion, but we didn't go deeper. And I suggest you to think about the following. How do you think, in our modern days, when the general impression of societies are being created by the global media, is it possible that through blogging you can provide your audience with the second opinion and the audience will respond to the second opinion?
I think it's possible, and it helps to change people's mind. But first of all, there are some problems, as we talked about Sasha today, and her channels got blocked several times because of political reasons. So there are some obvious problems with that, especially when it comes to topics like Russia or even China. They also closed down a lot of channels which were speaking positively about China. So there is a lot of censorship in the Western platforms. So there is a problem of communication, because all the platforms that they use in the West are Western platforms, which means that the content that is spread on there is already selected and censored. And then you have also the auto-censor of people who refuse to listen to anything that they don't already believe. And I see that in my comment section. When I speak positively about Russia, very often people, like, point blank, they refuse to believe anything that I say. They will tell me that I'm paid to do what I'm doing. Yeah, well, I wish that I was paid, but I'm not. They will say that, yeah, I'm a Kremlin agent or something like that. Just even though I show video proof of what I'm saying, like, I'm not going to make an AI video about the metro station or something like this. But even this is too much for them to believe, because they are prisoner of mindsets that we impose on them in the West, and they just refuse to go out of it. So it's really scary for me to see that, especially from France, where we're supposed to have critical thinking and we're supposed to be like the country of the French Revolution and everything. And when you realize that people are kind of imprisoning themselves and refusing to go out of their own little bubble, this is scary to me, actually.
Well, I'm sure that sooner or later, but the truth will find its way to go to the public and to the audience, and everything will be sorted out. I mean, these turbulent times cannot last forever. And we know that through our history that we had high and lows all the time. So now we are reaching another bottom of something. Maybe it will be lower than the previous one, maybe not. But I'm sure, I'm confident, and there will be the new renaissance between our relations. And let me wish you all the best in your activities. Please continue to tell the truth, to tell what you see. Share with your audience about your impressions and about everything you see, and try. And if you don't mind, we will continue this discussion next time.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup. Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Suzdal Holding presents Dynamic Spectrum Talks now.